Hello, I'm Peter Eyre. I'm an actor. I've been an actor since 1960. I've done many things in my life, and I've been discussing my past, my present, but not my future. I'm old. Enjoy.
So Peter, it's lovely to see you today. Thank you for inviting me into your home. We're going to start with the Whatever Happened To series. So let's start with question number 1. What is your full name given at birth?
Peter Gervais Joseph Eyre.
And when is your birthday and the year of your birth?
March the 11th, 1940.
Oh, that's interesting. 40 or 42?
40.
Oh wow! I think.
No, a lot of the records say 42. I think my agent once made me younger.
Oh, interesting. As a child, where were you born and raised?
I was born in New York. I grew up in America till I was 14. I lived in New York, in Colorado, in South Carolina, and Rhode Island.
If any, how many brothers or sisters did you have growing up, and where did you sit in the hierarchy?
I had 4 brothers and 2 sisters, and I had another child who died. So my mother had 8 children, and of those 8, I was the 6th.
Great. What is your earliest memory of going to the cinema or the theatre?
I think my earliest memories of the cinemas, because my mother was English and my father was American, so we travelled back and forth from America to England often on ships. And I think when I first was on a ship, one of the big ships, I was probably about 7, and I went to the cinema there. And I remember the thing that I remember most is, I can't remember, I think it was maybe Lana Turner, but whoever the star was kissing this guy, and as she kissed this guy, the film, which wasn't in very good condition, made a sort of kind of clicking sound, and I found that terribly exciting.
Growing up, it may well be Lana Turner, but did you have a favourite actor or actress whose work you really admired?
As I grew up, oh yes, well, I admired Vivien Leigh, and I admired Spencer Tracy, and I admired, it was the age of stars, wasn't it? So Barbara Stanwyck, Lana Turner, you name them, they were all there.
And was there an actual event or trigger that first prompted you to seriously consider acting as a profession? And how old do you think you were at the time?
I got interested in acting, and it sounds rather strange, but I got interested in acting really by listening to the opera, because when in America, and still is the case, the Metropolitan Opera broadcasts an opera every Saturday matinee. And the first time I ever heard my mother listening to an opera, I didn't know what the opera was, listening to this, I thought it was the most exciting thing I'd ever heard. So I used to listen regularly. In fact, I know most of the standard operas, I know more or less by heart. And I think I probably wanted to be a singer in a way, but when I was very young. But when I was at school, when I was at school in England, I acted quite a bit, and I got very good reactions. And I didn't really actually think that I was going to be an actor till on one of the last days of school. One of my mates said to me, "What are you going to do now that you leave the school?" And I said, it was the very first time I ever said it. I said, "I think I'm going to be an actor." He said, "Really?" I said, "Yes." And I was.
So that leads nicely on to the next question. Did you ever attend a stage school or audition, study or formally train to be an actor anywhere?
I did. after I left school and didn't get into Oxford, I secretly took an exam to RADA, and they accepted me, but not for a year. And then I was sent to France because my parents thought I wasn't well educated enough, to the Sorbonne. And I got so bored at the Sorbonne, I discovered where the drama school was in Paris, the Conservatoire. And I went there and I asked to speak to the administrator, and he spoke to me. And I said I was going to RADA, but I was in France studying at the university, and is there any way I could come to classes or anything? And he said to me, just hold on, we have a teacher here who's actually English, although he teaches actors in French. Excuse me. And you must meet him. So he came in and I met him, and he talked to me, and he said, come to see me, and he gave me his address, and he said, I'll ask you to audition for me, and if I think you're worth teaching, I'll teach you. So I went to see him, and he took me on. And so I studied on my own with him for quite a while, doing a lot of classical, Shakespeare, etc. And then one day he said to me, you can't be an actor without working with other people. So he had his friend, or maybe his boyfriend, I don't know, was the administrator of another big drama school called the Centre d'Art Dramatique. So I went there straight away as a kind of observer. But because of that time in France, actors either studied tragedy or comedy. They didn't do both. The two girls who did tragedy didn't have a partner. So I became their partner, and in the classes, I did all these scenes in French. I even did Shakespeare in French, but I did Racine, Corneille. You probably don't know who I'm talking about, Alfred de Musset, so that was but I never got onto a stage, or I was never in anything. And then after a while, the teacher I had at the school was a very, very famous French actress called Berthe Bovy. She created the role of that, the play by Cocteau, The Woman on the Telephone, La Voix Humaine. She was the original one of that. And she was a great sort of doyen of the Comédie Française. And she asked me one day what theatre I belonged to in England. And I thought, oh, she must think I'm quite good if she thinks I'm already a professional actor. So I lied, and I said I'm with the Old Vic. So then I told my English teacher, I thought I lied to Madame Bovy. I told her that I was at the Old Vic. He said, well, why don't you audition for the Old Vic? I said, well, I'm going to RADA. I haven't done anything. He said, if you're going to be an actor, you've got to have balls. So through various different things that happened, I got an audition at the Old Vic, and they took me on. They accepted me. I was very, very young. I was 19 or 20, and I was the youngest person in the company, and that's how I started.
Great. It seems like it was quite concurrent the way that you just articulated your journey there, Peter, but either before you began your acting career, or maybe when you were between roles at any time throughout your career, what other non-acting jobs have you ever done?
I used to write quite a lot for various magazines. I've done quite a lot of writing. And in fact, I've recently written a book, but it hasn't yet been accepted by a publisher. So I did write, but I didn't really have other jobs, or did I? No, I worked, at one time I worked for a theatre producer. He hired me to read scripts, Michael White, and I worked for him for quite a while, and I did things like that, but I can't say I went out and became a labourer or anything.
So what was your first ever paid acting performance, i.e. your professional debut? And again, how old were you?
My professional debut, I suppose, was with the Old Vic company, and it was on tour, and it was in Dublin. I can't say I really had a role. I was really a walk-on. I was an understudy of various parts, and I had a couple of tiny parts. But so I can't say that my debut at the Old Vic was. I was a soldier and an apparition and a murderer, etc. in Macbeth, but I wasn't. I didn't have a role. I think the first time I had a role in theatre was a few years later when I was in weekly rep in Harrogate, and I played a very, very old man in a play, who was from Yorkshire, and there we were in Yorkshire, in a play by a play called Celebration. Willis Hall was the writer. Anyway, that was my first role.
Now, it may have been during your time at the Old Vic, but a fun one for you now, Peter. Can you remember how old you were, or what production you were working on, when someone first asked you for an autograph?
I don't think I can remember that. I think that. Well, I think in Harrogate, I think there were various fans. They used to ask for autographs, but it wasn't. Actually, the whole thing of like in the West End now, because I know or have known all those regular autograph hunters and all those people who collect autographs. I think that's the thing that has developed quite over the years. I don't think I'm talking about when I started in the early '60s. I don't think it was quite like that. But I wasn't really in a play in London till the first play I was in London was in 1964, the Hampstead Theatre, and then later that year I was in that play which became a huge hit with Spike Milligan called Son of Oblomov. And then there were people looking for autographs, but it wasn't such a sort of business.
And did you put much thought into the construction of your autograph? Because you've got quite a bold signature, very big bold P and the E and the Y. Or is that just your natural handwriting?
That's my handwriting, I'm afraid.
So you didn't put much thought into your autograph?
No.
Interesting. At any point in your life or your career, have you ever been starstruck when meeting someone famous? And have you ever asked anyone for an autograph?
Yes. Well, when I was young, when I was in the holidays in the 50s, I guess, I used to go to lots of theatres, and I remember asking Dorothy Tootin for her autograph. And lots of different people. Yes, I did. John Gielgud. Yeah.
And throughout your career, were you ever one for collecting memorabilia along the way? And do you have many artifacts of memorabilia in your possession today?
Not really, no. I mean, I'm very, very. I mean, I suppose, somewhere a lot of photographs, but I'm not. I don't know. I'm not. Maybe I don't know what it is. I'm not kind of nostalgic about things like that.
Now, I might know the answer to this one, but to perform, what would you choose? Theatre, television, cinema, or radio? And what reasons would you give for your answer?
I think I'd choose the theatre, because I think in the theatre it's when you feel most complete as an actor, and you feel your contribution to whatever the play is and the production. Your contribution is very much everything you can give, and you're very free very often after the play opens and the director stops hanging around. You're very free to develop and maybe to change what you're doing a little bit, and you feel. I mean, I hate the word, but you feel kind of empowered in a way that in the cinema, however great it is to do some particular role, you don't ever feel that charge of your own authority in a way in being an actor.
And from the initial journey at the Old Vic throughout your career, how do you think theatre has changed over that time?
Well, I think it's changed enormously recently because, I mean, when one says theatre, we're talking about England now. When you look at I think like when I was young, when I was 15 or something, I used to get that magazine which doesn't exist anymore called Theatre World, and they always had a list of all the West End plays, and you looked down the things and they were practically all straight plays, and you saw the names of Alec Guinness, Celia Johnson, Peggy Ashcroft, Michael Ragrell, Ralph Richardson, blah, blah, blah. It was a theatre very much based on great actors, great performers, interesting plays, new plays, some old, mainly new plays, that doesn't exist anymore. First of all, there aren't those actors, and second of all, the West End is very much concentrated on having to make money, etc., etc. And you look down all the list of the theatres, and they're mainly musicals, and musicals you probably have never heard of, and certainly don't want to see.
Right, right. But talking about some of your acting performances, which of your parts, performances or characters would you say people remember you for the most?
Well, I don't know. I don't know who remembers me, but I think. I think when I first played Constantine and the Seagull, I played it first at Nottingham, and then I played it at Chichester, and then I played it in London, and that kind of raised my mark as a young actor. And that's not important. The important thing was I completely identified with that character. I think the reason why I was successful in it was I wasn't really acting. I was just being that boy.
Right. Now, it may well be that same role there, Peter, but whether it be for what you did on stage or screen, taking much more of an introspective view now, can you name any of your own individual performance or performances that you are personally the most proudest of or found the most rewarding?
Well, that was beginning with that one. And then when I was in Nottingham for 2 years, as was Penelope Wilton, and the last production I did, they sort of put on for me, was I played the Prince in The Idiot by Dostoevsky. And I think that, actually, now I remember there were a lot of autograph hunters after that. I mean, that was a big success for me. And it was a part I absolutely loved. That was one. Another one, I suppose, is not so very long ago in the West End when I played the Grand Inquisitor in Don Carlos, which was a very short part. I don't know if you saw it. And he only comes on at the end of the play. But I mean, it had a huge effect, both critically and also with audiences. And I've never received so many people backstage who were just amazed by the fact that I played such a very different role. And I loved doing it, and I loved working with Michael Grantage.
Fantastic. With such a long, distinguished career, I'm sure that there are many auditions that you have attended, but is there a part or a role that still you hankers today that you auditioned for, really wanted, but didn't get?
No, I don't think that I auditioned for anything that I didn't get, that I terribly wanted. But there have been various plays that I've always wanted to do, and they didn't happen for one reason or another. And one of them was Ibsen's Little Eyolf. I always thought that was a fascinating play, and it almost happened, but the whole thing went terribly wrong, and so I didn't do it. Now,
the traverse of that may be due to other commitments or conflicts in your schedule. Was there ever a part that you had to turn down for whatever reason, and again, later regretted that decision?
I've never regretted anything I've turned down. I've trusted my judgment. Maybe I've made mistakes, but I've never thought, oh, I shouldn't have turned that down. No, absolutely not. No.
Now, you've already mentioned Penelope Wilton as one, but you've worked with so many throughout your career, but which co-stars would you call out as being those that you were particularly fond of and you enjoyed working with the most?
Well, I suppose first of all, Irene Worth. Do you remember Irene Worth? Yes. Well, I first worked with her at Chichester in The Seagull, and then in London in Ghosts, and also in Hamlet. I played Hamlet, she played Gertrude. And then we became very, very close, and she inspired me very much in the way she worked. She was so original. And then I did long, endless performances of a thing that I actually wrote, which was a play. Well, is it actually a play? I don't know what it is. An entertainment based on the letters between Gustave Flaubert, the writer, and Georges Sand, the writer. And we did it in America and England and Australia. We recorded it on the radio. We did it for a long time, and so I became very involved with her. And the way she worked and everything. I mean, I can't say I did what she did. I didn't. But working with her was one of the most inspiring things that happened to me in all my life as an actor.
And are there any other names that you can call out that you liked working with the most, other than Irene?
That I like working with the most? I loved working with Susan Fleetwood, who died and also became a great friend of mine. I loved working with. I've done only televisions with them, but I loved working with Maggie Smith. I loved working with Helen Mirren. God, there's so many. I mean, because I'm a male, I'm thinking of the female kind of partner in all these things. Who else was there? Well, Penelope, of course, and Eileen Atkins. Oh, she's great. Eileen Atkins. She's one of our greatest actresses.
Yes, I second that for sure. Now, maybe a little bit more controversial now. What about those that you had a tougher time with? Those that were maybe less generous of their time, namely those that you didn't like?
Well, shall I start with Spike Milligan, who was a monster? And I was in that play. I was only 23 or 4. I was in that play for about a year, and that was a horrendous experience. So, I could really... No, that was awful. And there are various other... I had a difficult time with Nigel Davenport. I was in the West End in a production of The Three Sisters with him. I find him very aggressive and combative. Well, because there was a time, you see, when I was a young actor, older male actors drank a lot, which they don't do anymore. And very often you had to forgive a lot of these star actors, because when they came on for the second act, they already were well fueled. But that doesn't happen anymore.
Now, rather than asking you who your favourite director is or was, maybe I'll do that after. But what I will ask is, outline what a director needs to do to get the best performance out of Peter Eyre. And can you name any directors that you worked with that did just that?
I think I worked with so many directors, but I think the best directors I've ever worked with, when I look at their lives and everything, most of them have been actors, and they understand the acting. They don't observe actors from a kind of distance. They understand the way an actor works, and they feel very much more part of the process. And when you work with a director like that, and who understands you as an actor and also has that instinct about you as a person, you feel very, very free. I mean, I worked a lot with Jonathan Miller, who was a great influence on me, but I can't really say he was a man of the theatre. He was a kind of brilliant person, a sort of Renaissance man who happened to do theatre. But I mean, the directors I really feel that I especially loved working with are Trevor Nunn, Michael Grandage, quite recently I did a play recently, 6 years ago or something, I did a play at Edinburgh directed by Tom Cairns, who I thought was absolutely brilliant. And he doesn't do very, very much, which is a great shame, because he was a brilliant designer, and then he became a brilliant director, and he was just terrific.
Now, you've worked with him at least 3 times, but please describe your relationship with James Ivory.
Oh, James Ivory. James Ivory, I think he auditioned me first for Room with a View, and I can't remember what the part was, but I was rather pissed off I didn't get it. I thought that was sad. And then he asked me to be in, the first film I did with him was Morris, and the next film I did with him was The Remains of the Day. I think a lot of my part in The Remains of the Day, though, hit the cutting room floor. And then I did the film with Tony Hopkins about Picasso, surviving Picasso. Well, he did interview me for that. Actually, I was in New York in a play, and he called me up and interviewed me for that. And we already knew each other, but that's what happens. And then the last thing I did with him was the Golden Bowl, when actually I replaced an actor that they'd fired. So that was a kind of last-minute job.
And how would you describe his directing style in particular?
James? Well, James he's brilliant at kind of creating a scene, almost like he has such sense of social observations, and unlike a lot of directors, he's brilliant at directing parties on the screen, and all the interaction between people. He's not the kind of director who would talk to you very directly about the emotional content of your role in a kind of... I think Tony Hopkins, in his autobiography, which I haven't read, but I read a quote, said the other day, that almost what I'm saying now, he doesn't really... he doesn't sort of direct you as an actor in a way that some other directors would. He doesn't sort of investigate the emotional range of your character. He rather lets you... He casts very well, and he lets you get on with it. He's very pleasant to work with.
Great answer and great insights. So a couple of questions now that might put you somewhat on the spot, but let's give them a go. It does not need to be any that you've appeared in personally, but can you name at least 3 must-see films that you would tell everyone that they should see at least once in their lifetime?
My first choice would be, this is rather common, I think, probably, Gone with the Wind, which I haven't seen for years, but it's just made such an impression on me. Then I would choose, because I was a big fan of the films of Antonioni, I would choose The Eclipse, and then another foreign film of Bertolucci, The Conformist. So
what is it in particular that has made them 3 jump out at you?
Well, Gone with the Wind, I suppose that's a rather conventional one in a way, because it just was such a big spectacle and such a kind of great entertainment and brilliant cast, and Vivian Leigh, who I was totally in love with, was just magic in it. The Antonioni film, all Antonioni's work, introduced you to a new kind of cinema that one hadn't seen before. The rhythm of it, the strangeness of it, and the intelligence of it, and the Bertolucci film was just a very, very beautiful and exciting film about a particular period, and had wonderful performance by Jean-Louis Trintignant. And you see, growing up in London, especially like in my late teens, early 20s, there were 2 or 3 cinemas in London where you could see all the foreign films that came out. You could see all the French films, all the Italian films, all the films from Iran, I don't know, everywhere. That doesn't exist anymore. So my film taste is very much not to do with English films, which don't interest me very much, but mainly with those foreign films.
Great. Again, a bit of a left field one, but I hope a fun question. You are hosting an intimate dinner party and you're able to invite 3 guests to come along. Who would you choose to invite and why?
I don't think any of them would be actors, I'm afraid. I would invite Emily Dickinson, the American poet, genius, Marcel Proust, the great French writer, and the third one, who would I choose? I think I'd choose somebody, in fact, I did know, James Baldwin, the African-American writer. He became a friend of mine. I met him when I was a student in Paris, and he would make the dinner party go. He never stopped talking and doing things. Emily Dickinson, I think she probably would hardly speak at all because she was a recluse. So her coming to my dinner would be a big event for her, which would terrify her. And Marcel Proust would be probably slightly critical of the company, but in the end, very interesting.
Now, no doubt that would be a fabulously interesting evening, but maybe a little bit serious, a little bit intellectual. Just for a little bit of light entertainment, who would you say are your favourite comedians?
My favourite comedians? Oh. Well, I love Morecambe and Wise. Makes me laugh even thinking of them. I love Tommy Cooper. Does Groucho Marx count as a comedian? Well, yeah, I liked all the Marx Brothers stuff. There was an American comedian. Was he called Fred Allen? I really liked him. He was he would do these sort of depressive monologues. It was so funny. I know quite a few of them. Yeah. And Lenny Bruce, come on. Lenny Bruce, I saw him when he was in London at the Establishment. He was brilliant. Because he improvised everything, or seemed to improvise everything. Maybe it was a trick. But he was remarkable, absolutely remarkable.
Great. Now, there's a little bit of information that you can read online, Peter, but we've established already that they often get your date of birth wrong. But tell us something about you or your career that most people would not already know. Do you have any major passions, pastimes, hobbies, maybe interest in sports?
Well, I'm very, very interested, and I studied music when I was young. I'm very interested in classical music. I studied voice for quite a long time. I studied piano for quite a long time. And I suppose, in fact, I would love to have been a musician. I love musicians, and I've worked a lot I've done, spoken roles in concerts with big orchestras. And I always notice how musicians, they're so excited when an actor comes, and it's another world. And I'm so excited by them because it's another world to me. So all the times, whenever I've done concerts with the London Symphony Orchestra or with John Gardner or all these great musicians, I've just loved it.
Now, having enjoyed such a long career, and maybe to put you in a somewhat of a reflective mood, what are your overarching memories of the career that you've had? Do you have any significant regrets? And maybe, how would you like to be remembered as an actor?
Well, I'd like people to remember me with, admiration, respect, regrets. I don't really regret it, but I mean, because I didn't really like television, just watching television or being in most televisions, I find extremely boring. I can't now remember what they were, I turned down quite a few major sort of TV series, which would probably have made my value as an actor commercially much more than it was or is. I sort of regret having done, I don't know why I was so grand about the whole thing, but I sort of slightly regret that. But on the other hand, if I ever watched any of these programs, I think, oh, thank Jesus, I'm not in that.
Now, when you look at that young actor coming out of the Old Vic, and then we fast forward to today, are you happy with the career that you've had in general?
Yes, on the whole, I am. Yes, I am. I think. I was thinking the other day, talking to a young actor. In fact, I was very lucky that all these things happened to me. I did hardly any auditions for the things that I did and companies and various productions in London. I hardly ever had an audition. I had an audition very early on when I was young. I auditioned for the Hampstead Theatre when I did that play there. I auditioned for the Oblomov when that was coming on. It actually opened at the Lyric Hammersmith. But I mean, when I went to Nottingham, well, that's where I sort of maybe flowered a bit as a young actor, because it was a very successful theatre at the time, very well run by Stuart Burge, and I was in an enormous amount of plays there. Sometimes I was in 3 plays on at the same day: a children's play in the morning, a new play in the afternoon, and a classic in the evening. It was a great time of things happening. But I don't think I auditioned for Nottingham. They just took me on.
So when we're talking about that young actor at the Old Vic, what advice would you have given him now that you've gone through that career in the way that you have? What would you have told that young Peter Eyre?
I've just said it's probably better if you went to a drama school in London, because if you'd gone to a drama school in London, you'd have learned how to fence, which I learned how to do later in my career, but you would have learned how to use theatre makeup, which when I was at the Old Vic, I didn't know anything about. I had to lie and pretend that I'd left my makeup in France. And then an older actor told me to go to the Leichter studios and learn how to put on makeup. And of course, the Leichter studios, when the man said to me, "What roles are you playing at the Old Vic?" and I would say, "Well, in St. Joan, I'm a nobleman, and then I'm a monk, and nothing." Anyway, the point was, he sold me as many sticks of Leichter makeup as he could do. And he also did these drawings of how I should make up. So I practiced that when I did the first production of the Old Vic. It wasn't entirely successful, my makeup experiments, but anyway. But also I would have learned, I would have been with, when I was in the Old Vic, a lot of the young actors in it were people who had all been at RADA or at the same drama school. So they had a kind of instant camaraderie. I didn't know anything. I got in, I think it's very, very rare for an actor to be taken on by a company like the Old Vic or any company who's actually never been in a play. I'd never been in a play. I'd never been on the stage. I somehow lied my way into the Old Vic. And that's how it all started. But I think I'll tell actors to go to drama. Also, when they go to drama school, when they do their final shows, they might get an agent. When I was at the Old Vic, I didn't have an agent. I didn't even know what an agent was. I certainly found out later.
So bringing us completely to the present day, Peter, finish the sentence. What happened to the actor Peter Eyre?
What happened to the actor Peter Eyre is he got old. His health wasn't very, very good for a while. And he doesn't want to be an old actor who appears in some television play for 10.5 seconds and then has a heart attack because he's so ancient. So the actor Peter Eyre may have called it quits.
Peter Eyre, thank you very much.
Thank you.